Welcome to the second episode of the Skills Factory, talks and ideas about skills from Europe and beyond. This is the podcast series done by the European Training Foundation, European Union agency working on the topic of human capital development in the EU neighboring countries. In our first episode, we've discussed whether inclusive learning is a myth. This time, we propose you another intriguing and yet very practical topic, skills for the future. According to the World Economic Forum, 94% of businesses will need their employees to pick up new skills on the job. Nearly a half of core skills to perform the job will change by 2022. It means in approximately 1 year. So when we speak about the future of work that is changing due to automation, AI, digitalization, we are not thinking about 2040 or 2050. Actually, we are talking about the upcoming years. In 2020, even more disruption came to our workplaces and our education systems. COVID-19 pandemic brought even bigger challenges to the changing world of work. So when we speak about skills for the future, what can we do to be prepared for the post-pandemic world of work? I'm Maria Lvova, and today I'd like to introduce our two amazing guests to talk about the topic of skills for the future. Walter Vandervelde, professor, speaker, and trainer in business creativity, and Ummuhan Bardak, labor market expert from the European Training Foundation. Hello, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Hi. So my first question will be to Ummuhan. Ummuhan, what do we know about the trends in the changing labor markets and how the global pandemic has influenced these ongoing trends?
When we look at all the literature, I think we can identify more or less 7 trends in terms of labor market trends. The first one that everyone talks about is the destruction of the jobs, some of the jobs, at least owing to automation. Another trend, the second trend, is related to the changing task content of the existing occupations. And as a result, we see the third trend, which is the polarizing occupational structure, so-called job polarization, which means medium-skilled jobs are decreasing while high and lower-end jobs are increasing. The fourth trend is the emergence of new jobs because of the new application of the new technologies like blogger, social media manager, etc. The fifth trend is related to the stratification or segmentation of the knowledge work. Some of experts call this digital Taylorism, indeed. And the sixth trend, as a result of all these first five trends, is the rise of non-standard employment, so-called atypical jobs, different from the full-time permanent jobs. And then, of course, as a result, the seventh trend is the erosion of the standard employment benefits.
So these are the trends that affect nearly all the economies, right?
Yes. All the economies are affected more or less, but this is unavoidable to not to be affected, really.
Mm-hmm. When I had a chance to talk to youngsters these days, a lot of them say to me that they want to be YouTubers. So talking about the emergence of new jobs, but they hardly know what kind of skills do they need to become YouTubers. So coming back to the topic of the skills and skills for the future, if we think all those trends in the labor markets globally, what would be the skills for the future, or the skills that will be most valued on the changing labor market in the upcoming years? Is there a list of them? And can we draw a magic recipe of what the unemployed people should do in order to find a job in the post-pandemic world of work? Walter?
Well, first of all, I think you have to separate the knowledge skills, what we know the hard skills, from the behavioral skills, or what you call the soft skills. And those knowledge skills are much more sensitive to our changing world, while the soft skills aren't, because they're intrinsically human. And you have, of course, these skills of the future you can easily find on the list of several organizations like the World Economic Forum, like LinkedIn Learning. But there are many international universities and other education and work-related organizations who have done quite some research on this area as well. First of all, when it comes to the hard skills of the future, well, it shouldn't be a surprise that most of them are technology related. And here you find things like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, blockchain expertise, UX design, and stuff like that. And that's very straightforward. When it comes to behavioral or soft skills, those lists tend to differ much more, although the same kind of skills on the top of the list keep coming back. And that's why, together with my students, I have analyzed all these lists of the future soft skills, hoping to find the differences as well as some overlaps. And what I was really looking for were the roots, the fundamentals of all these future skills. Just like you have blue, red, and yellow, primary colors with which you can compile all the other colors. So I wondered, would it also be possible to detect a fixed number of primary skills that are the roots of all the other soft skills? And yes, the answer is yes. So here's my list of the 5 primary soft skills of the future. And it shouldn't be a surprise, it starts with creativity. And creativity is coming up with ideas that are at the same time new and useful. So this is all mostly about problem solving, about connecting the dots, looking at things from different perspectives. And the second one is critical thinking. And critical thinking is analyzing and questioning the facts, which leads you to making the right and the rational decisions, developing opinions, visions, and strategy, etc. The third one is self-management. And self-management is knowing who you really are, your true self, and working towards the goals you want to achieve. So this results in a clear focus and in high motivation. Number 4 for me is social intelligence, which is closely related to what we know as emotional intelligence. So this is about communicating and collaborating with others. It's about convincing people and creating a positive group dynamics. And the last one is attention management, which is also known as time management. But as you cannot manage time, you're obliged to divide this time into useful moments of attention. And this is about succeeding in organizing yourself and finding your natural workflow and rhythm to enhance your daily productivity and proactiveness. So this is a list of 5 concerning me.
Mm-hmm. The issue is that when you listen to those, you try to understand those skills. It seems that we all somehow have those in a way, no? So if you think, for instance, about creativity, we all are creative in different ways. But I understand that we really have to master those skills in order to be relevant and in order to be people that employers will seek for in the future. But my question to you is, where is the right place to learn them? Do we get to learn them in the formal education system?
Well, unfortunately, our classical education system focuses, I think, still too much on the gaining knowledge part. But I'm quite sure, and I'm convinced that the change is coming soon. And just to give an example, as you know, I'm a professor for 7 years now in a bachelor called Idea and Innovation Management at the Erasmus University College in Brussels. And from the very, very beginning, we chose to integrate most of these skills into our program. Just be aware that we're talking here about students between, let's say, 18 and 25 years old. And for most of them, it's a real eye-opener, and they experience it as a true an added value. So it offers them what I call an unfair advantage on the job market, where young graduates that manage this skill are considered much more mature. And now, based on this positive experience, I'm now considering organizing kind of masterclass or a postgraduate studies purely dedicated to those 5 primary skills of the future. And I'm really convinced that there's a high demand and a market for that.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. And I think it might be actually the future of education as well, no, to create such program. As we heard from Ummuhan, the drastic change that is happening right now in the labor market includes the introduction of the artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and automation. But actually, these trends are also putting many professionals of a high-skilled profiles at risk, because their jobs could be substituted by a machine or AI. So my question is, what is the way forward? Are we all have to urgently start learning informatics and AI, or they will have to change completely, those high-skilled people, they will have to change completely their profession?
Well, in your previous question, you were talking about is there a magic recipe? And unfortunately, there isn't. And certainly not a short track to success, as you know. My answer consists of three simple words: lifelong learning. So both on the hard as on the soft skills. So never stop improving and updating yourself on the changes that relate to your job and the industry you're working in, so you can stay relevant. And if that implies coming out of your comfort zone and making the effort of thoroughly reskilling yourself in technology-related matters, then that's the only way to go, of course. And at the same time, work hard on those 5 behavioral skills that I mentioned before, because they will make the real difference and give you wings to grow as a professional and open doors to new opportunities. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think going out of the comfort zone must become kind of a professional business card for everyone starting from 2020. But coming back to the labor markets, so Ummuhan, what is happening now in labor markets in developing countries? Because European Training Foundation works with EU neighborhoods, and most of those countries are transition or developing countries. What are the difference between developing countries and the rest of the world in terms of these trends that we've mentioned in changes and the skills for the future?
As I mentioned, the trends might be universal, but their effects vary extensively based on many factors in every and each country. These factors include the political, economic, legal, and institution systems of the countries. Also the business climate in a given country, labor relations, I mean the relations between capital and labor, the capacity for innovation or the adoption rate of the technology in general, as well as the human resources. They are all determining factors because these factors interact with the incoming global trends, and the result from this interaction might be very different in every country. Take, for example, the countries with a relatively bigger size of industrial structure. They say, at least many experts say, that countries with a larger share of jobs in manufacturing will show higher average risk to the automation, or countries with large agricultural sector will see continuous mechanization and automation as well, while the countries with high services sector may require much more investment in the types of skills, human resources that also Walter mentioned previously, especially these soft skills, foundational skills, etc. Therefore, we cannot say that the results of these effects are the same in every country. And also the countries react to these changes under the political leadership, under the economic leadership. And one reaction of one country could be different from the other reaction. So all these factors change the outcome at the end.
But we can definitely say that those countries that have a big proportion of the economies in agriculture or traditional manufacturing are more vulnerable to those changing skills. Yes. Speaking about the skills needed in the future, we always think about the employment possibilities, but how the employment and hiring would look like in the future. We already see now how recruitment processes are changing in the past years. We've seen how big tech companies have decided to use AI for the pre-selection phases of recruitment. So basically, when we look for the job and we prepare our CV, we have to think in terms of the machine learning and keywords in order to be picked by the AI and not the person. So even some interviews phases and are also automated these days. The way we look for a job is completely different now. Remember the old times when we were used to put and print our CV and bring it in paper to the potential employers? Well, this time seems to be completely gone. Walter, so do you think that job seekers will have to adapt themselves in order to make it through the recruitment processes that is automated?
Well, I think I think mostly still today in the recruitment process, there are mainly two phases. There is a written part, and that's like sending, like you mentioned, sending your CV and motivational letter by email today, of course, followed by the physical part, where the job seeker meets the recruiter or recruiters face to face or online in the live meeting. Well, the focus on the first part is mainly on the hard skills. What's the candidate's experience? What industry did he work in? Which professional knowledge does he have? And does it all fit perfectly into the vacancy? You see, this is a very irrational process, which means that it can easily be done by means of artificial intelligence. And the job seeker should be aware of that and primarily focus on the data. In the second part, however, the focus is more on the behavioral skills, on the human part. And that's something most recruiters, with a very good reason, I would say, don't want to hand over to a computer or not completely to a computer. And it's true that in some cases today, also this second part is partially automated, but then we're either talking about routine jobs where soft skills are not that crucial, or very large companies or organizations that want employees to fit into some strict corporate culture. And as we all know, those awful personality tests, we don't like them. But for jobs that require a certain level of human interaction and organizations that are investing in the growth potential of their employees, you will seldom be judged by a computer as a job seeker, or not alone by a computer. What I also see from the other side, that there's an emergent trend of applicants replacing their classic letter of motivation with a video message. And on the one hand, this is, of course, a result of the pandemic, which has made people less afraid to use video as a communication tool. But on the other hand, it's also very consciously to stand out from the other applicants and to seize the opportunity to demonstrate their behavioral skills from the very first phase. And I'd say to any job seeker, if the occasion allows you to do so, please don't hesitate and grab that chance.
So the message here is don't be shy and try to do the video CV. That's actually a term that I also see recently. So video CV is definitely something to be tried. Ummuhan, do we have data about the recruitment strategies of companies? It's like a really key process to match the job seeker's skills with employers' needs. Can we trust it to the machine?
Well, the recruitment strategies of companies can be very different, I must say, because it really is very much context specific. Depends on the country's labor market, institutions and traditions, the size of the companies. For example, small size company recruits differently from the big size or multinational company, or the sector, for example, type of professions or occupations, and particularly the level of the skill level of the workers. I mean, low-skilled workers are recruited differently from the high-skilled workers. I mean, IT engineers or data specialists are recruited differently from plumbers or laborers. Working as a labor market expert, working in the transition and developing countries, I must say that for many small and medium-sized companies, the key source of finding staff is still using informal connections, contacting similar companies to ask for recommendations, or applying to the public employment services, which provides labor intermediation. This is particularly true if they look for low-skilled or sometimes even medium-skilled workers. However, we also see, as mentioned by Walter, that there are increasing level of online job vacancies. Social media or private job portals are becoming quite common mediums to find jobs. And their use is, I think, proportional with the bigger size of companies and higher skill levels in general. We also see the use of social media accounts, actually, recently, more and more to collect information about the job candidates, especially among the headhunting companies, big companies like Monster, for example. I heard actually that the candidates are even asked sometimes to provide their Facebook password or Twitter and Instagram accounts so that the headhunting companies could check the personality traits of these job candidates, which is for me a bit of too much going on.
Yeah,
I mean, in
Ummuhan,
terms of
actually,
ethical-
I think that, well, I'm a nerd of social media, love them, but does this situation of, actually, I see it a lot as well, that a lot of companies want to see the social media profiles of their potential employees, and does this make, this is a new trend that makes the knowledge of social media a compulsory skill to find a job. So in a way, also, it can lead to a so-called social media popularity index, which is, it's quite dodgy. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. This is really one of the key things about one of the digital skills package. I mean, how to use responsibly and carefully the social media accounts. That is definitely becoming an issue. Another thing, in my opinion, especially in the use of algorithms in job matching, I am slightly skeptic about it. Why? Because these algorithms are designed by humans, often including the same human biases. For example, we know, actually, there was a very recent book about the Silicon Valley, how gender biased the software programmers are. So I think we should avoid the trap of technological determinism in these discussions, because much of the current debate centers around the potential of technology rather than its empirical realization on the ground, in the companies, among the individuals. It is there, of course, as a new opportunity, the usage of algorithms, but there are many issues surrounding it for people, individuals to learn and to make it much more user-friendly also for the companies.
Walter, what do you say usually to your students about the social media usage for seeking an employment? Do they ask you about it?
No, I don't get that question very often, and they're also a bit trained to this kind of thing, to broaden their network, like a tool for like LinkedIn, especially. It's very important, and we learn them how to use it. And yeah, your own social media, that's still the advantage. You own it yourself, so you put in it whatever you want, but be careful what you put in it. Of course, that's very important.
Yeah, but the question here is, you can be an excellent engineer in AI, but not being a good social media manager. And then if you're being judged by your social media accounts, then you are not getting your opportunity to have an interview with employer.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's why this social intelligence is one of the main soft skills that you should, one of the primary soft skills that you should learn. And social intelligence is something that is very obvious to use in social media. Yes, of course.
We know that vocational education and training has suffered a lot from the school closures. If theoretical subjects can be somehow taught online, when it comes to practical skills, distance learning becomes very difficult. So shall we expect to have less VET graduates in the upcoming years, vocational education graduates, or let's say graduates with less practical skills? Ummuhan.
Yes, well, there is no doubt that practical skills are difficult to gain through distance learning. For VET profiles with significant, for vocational education profiles with significant modules of apprenticeship, internship, or traineeship, the closures and social distancing affected the education substantially. Take, for example, nurses or laboratory technicians or welders. They cannot learn the practical skills only by distance education. So some schools decided to delay the graduation of the last year students, depending on the country context and school context, because their students couldn't complete the required period of apprenticeship or internship. This means less VET graduates in the upcoming year for some countries, for some sectors, but some other schools also, I observe, make it much easier for their students to graduate in the profiles with smaller part of internship or traineeship modules. This the latter example means having wet graduates with less practical skills. Because of all these problems we have faced during the pandemic period, there is now a new discussion on the use of augmented reality and virtual reality in education, particularly to in gaining practical skills through the use of the simulations. But maybe in conclusion, we have to say that employers will need more orientation training or on the job training of new recruits for companies. We know in general that employers always complain about the fresh graduates, they do not have enough practical skills, etc., etc. And actually they say also that it takes a minimum of 6 months training for a fresh graduate to become functional worker in any given company. But this period was special, and they need to give more attention to the on-the-job training of the new recruits. That's as simple as that.
So a bigger investment of time into new graduates will be required from employer side. That's something we already know.
So, yeah.
Okay, and vocational education training, on higher education training, we know that there is a big discussion ongoing about the T-shaped professionals. So those that have both breadth in how to collaborate and innovate across disciplines, which represents the horizontal part of a T, and in-depth knowledge and experience in one specific area of expertise. And then there are I-shaped professionals, so highly versed in a specific area of expertise with very in-depth knowledge in one area. Would it be correct to say that the biggest difference between the two would be the soft skills? So those that Walter mentioned at the very beginning. Is it correct to say that the traditional education system, in the traditional one, most of the pupils are equipped to be I-shaped professionals? So is it possible for an I-shaped to become a T-shaped, and how? Walter?
Well, it's always a bit the classic dilemma. Should I become a specialist or a generalist? And of course, this highly depends on the job and the industry, of course, but related to the market demand as well. And that demand evolves quickly. So therefore, yes, the T-shaped professional is certainly my preferred model. And yes, I also use this model as a metaphor, whereby I literally put the soft skills on the horizontal axis. And in that metaphor, I call them WINGS, which is an acronym for Work and Industry Neutral Growth Skills. In other words, the skills that are independent from the job you do and independent from the industry you work in, because therefore they can be used anywhere. But unfortunately, you're right about our traditional education system. In general, educational programs are still mainly focused on those knowledge skills, on what you say, the vertical axis of the I-shaped people. And as a student, you're supposed to develop that horizontal axis, your wings, somewhere on your own, I'd say. And I think it has a lot to do with the belief that you cannot learn or improve those skills, which is totally wrong, because wings or soft skills are a mindset. And you can teach them the same way you do with knowledge skills.
And what about adult learners? Are there limits to acquire those wings, those soft skills, outside the education system? Because the adult learners usually have to learn on the job, or they have to do some courses by themselves. Is there like an open door for them to also improve those skills?
Well, yes, in fact, with these soft skills, there are 3 levels of development. And let me explain that, what I was talking about, the mindset. So take creativity as an example, as one of the 5 wing skills that I explained. So everyone is born with a certain amount of creativity. I think you agree with that. So that's the first level, and that's what we call talent. So whatever amount of creative talent you have, you can improve it by learning what I call the mechanisms behind creativity. So creativity becomes a skill, and that's the second level. So you're able to dig up that skill whenever you think you need it, just like you do with a knowledge skill. But a wing skill or a soft skill doesn't stop there, it goes further. You need to practice it day after day and in any situation possible, so that it becomes a habit, a reflex, or a natural way of thinking, acting, and reacting. And that's the third level. That is what I call a mindset. And once you reach that third level, those skills become a part of yourself, of your personality. And that goes beyond your professional life even.
Yeah, it sounds like a big journey, that you start on and you never end. And
That's
I
right.
would like to stick to one of the keywords that you said, Walter, is lifelong learning. There is an expression that necessity is the mother of invention. But lifelong learning is not a new invention, and we know from many international foresights and reports that those entering the labor market now and trying to find a job will need to change their professional careers frequently. So they will not stick to one profession, and there the lifelong learning comes in. We'll have to be using this invention, the lifelong learning invention, for all because of a real necessity that is even bigger because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the only reasonable thing to do right now is to keep on learning, online, at the workplace, at home, and be ready for the change. That was the second episode of the Skills Factory podcast. I'd like to thank our guests. Thank you, Walter.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Ummuhan.
It was very nice. Thank you.
Thanks for following us and stay tuned because there is much more to come. Thank you.